I'm going to open it up to some Q&A. Before I do that, one of the things I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just, take a look at the first message you heard, just jot down like, hey, here's my takeaway from that message. So I'm actually teaching you how to journal. For those of you that don't journal, here's one way, which is just like, hey, what did I learn from that message? Or what's a takeaway? My message on preparing for 2020, what's a takeaway? Jacob's message, what's one takeaway? Dane's message, what's one takeaway or a question? Same thing on all of these. And then Greg's message, what's a takeaway and or a question? So let me give you a minute to do that. While you are doing that, I believe that you can listen and write at the same time. I want to say thank you very much for just simply being here today. I want to thank you for what it took for you to earn the right to be here today. And I also want to thank you in advance for what you're going to do this summer. It speaks volumes about you as a person that you're spending your time with us, today and tomorrow to learn how to be better in your role as a leader this summer. So I want to just publicly acknowledge all of you, and I want to thank you. I remember being an assistant manager, and the office that I was in sold $87,000. It did not break any records. I was paid 2% of that. So I think I made $1,600 that summer, but it was still an invaluable experience. And so one of the things I want to share with you is, make sure that you're clear on what do I want to get out of the summer after having heard a couple of these messages. Another thing I'll share with you is I think it's really important to communicate with your message, and Alex will probably talk more about this tomorrow, but communicate with your manager. When are the days that you need off? Perhaps there's like mom has a birthday, right? You probably want to take that night off. Maybe Mother's Day is a big deal for you. Maybe Father's Day is a big deal. Maybe it's not. Again, every family is different. So we really don't assume anything, but you got to communicate with your manager. I think it's really valuable to communicate with your manager. Here are some times and days that I might need in advance, right? And so we really try to plan the entire summer before it happens. So with that, let me go ahead and open it up to any questions that you may have. And you could feel free to throw them in the chat, or you can just go ahead and ask them out loud.
I have a question.
Sure.
This goes back to the days where we're doing like PDIs after training, all that stuff. Check how the rep's feeling, make sure those three things, make sure they're feeling good, have people to call, and have a plan. In terms of the feeling good, if a rep is not feeling good, what do we do in order to bring them to feel good?
That's a really great question. So I always feel that, by the way, I do have a point of view. I think one of the things you always want to have is a point of view. I'm going to outsource this. I really believe that the knowledge of the group is always greater than that of any individual. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second. Let's answer that question in your own mind. How do I help someone feel good? By the way, there's a lot of ways, right?
I'd say being positive. I don't know.
Okay, and give me an example.
So I know back in my experience, through sports, even through calculating like that with my manager, with Haley, just like if I had a bad day and she does positive reinforcement with baseball, with Haley, it'd be like, you know what, move on. It's going to happen. There's failures in life. And being positive with that is we're on the next demo, or for baseball, next at bat, just having those positive reinforcements, like it's going to be okay. Really brought my self-confidence up and elevated my play the next time, or my next demo, the next session, whatever you want to call it.
I love that, Tyler. So, I think one of the things that Tyler's talking about is giving people perspective, right? So, hey, how can this experience that you're having, or I know you're not feeling good, right? At a no sale, again, we're not doing brain surgery, right? Imagine a brain surgery going wrong. Like, that's a very serious, and I'm not making fun of it. That's a very serious thing, right? Imagine being a lawyer and, you're defending someone and you forget to introduce some evidence and they go to jail. Like, that's a very serious thing. Worst day selling knives. It's like someone stood me up on a demo. I had 3 no sales in a row. So just, help them have some perspective. So one thing I think that really helps out is what I believe it's Tyler, right? Tyler mentioned, which is like, hey, has anything like this ever happened to you before? Because I know it's happened for me. I tell my kids all the time, my first year, I was the worst manager in the company. My first year as a division manager, I was the worst manager in the company. A few years later, I was the best manager in the company. So you know what? Don't worry about it. These things happen. Let's focus on where you want to be. So I think asking questions always reframes their focus. Some people wrote down encouraging words, right? Can someone want to share something like that around that?
You could remind them like how great they are, like in terms of like what they accomplished previously, what they got through, and just saying like, yeah, like you did this. What makes you think you can't do this, right? You got through this storm, you can get through this other one.
Xavier, I love asking that question. So I'm going to role play this. So, hey, Xavier, and you don't have to answer, but Xavier, can you think about a time in your life when you felt really proud of something that you did, or an accomplishment that you accomplished?
Yes, I can. Yep.
All right. Let me ask you a question. Was there any adversity? Were there any bad days? Were there any times you felt like quitting?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Can you tell me an example?
I guess the Cutco event a couple years ago when I got on stage and like did a couple of jokes, I was horrified and forgot like all my jokes and legit just went off the top of my head and somehow it worked out. So yeah, I was scared and I was so happy afterwards that I cried tears of happiness.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure, the next demo is going to go like that, right? Always reminding people of like, hey, you've done this before. Vector's no different. It's a skill. You're going to get better. You're going to make mistakes, right? I think even having just some mantras, hey, again, you've heard this before. And if you haven't, let me just share with you 1/3 of your days just in life. And I say this to my kids a lot also. One of our kids had a standardized test and he felt he didn't do well. It was his first time taking a standardized test. And I said, look, 1/3 of your days are not going to go well. And 1/3 of them are going to go average and 1/3 of them are going to go great. And we were about to go to hockey practice. And so he was really down. He was like, this is a bad day. I said, hey, how can you make this next part of your day, hockey practice, be great? And it was great. And I said, how do you feel about the day? He's like, well, it was a good day. And I was kind of like, yeah, so giving perspective, helping people understand what their strengths are, I think, like Xavier said, I think is also really good. Someone mentioned, I think, complimenting them. I think just, observing like, hey, here are some things that I notice about you. I think it's great when you just kind of love on someone for being awesome. So I'm going to actually give you an example. Evan, we have never met. Is that accurate? Hey, Evan, I just want to say, thank you for being creative and putting up that the backdrop, the virtual background. I think that says a lot about you, that you're like, hey, you know what? I bleed Cutco blue. I think that's awesome. Hey, the other thing I want to thank you for is asking a question because you want to get better at your job. Dude, that's awesome. That is a wonderful thing to want to get better, to be able to impact other people. And the other thing, I want to thank you for asking the first question, because there was a period of silence there that it was a little awkward for everyone, and you asked. I want to thank you, man, for that. Evan, let me ask you a question. How do you feel right now?
It feels nice to be complimented.
Right. And that I noticed some things, right? So you can notice things that quickly. All right. Evan, does that help? And also, there's a lot of great things said in the chat there. I didn't read all the questions, if there was any questions. So let's go to the next question. Who's got another question here?
I got one, Mr. Muriel.
Sure, Nick.
How did you instantly know going that after your first summer as AM that you were going to go right to branch?
No.
Or did you think about going higher up in the sales list or? Yeah,
great question. Look, here's what I can tell you. I remember when I was a rep at one point, I did an exercise and I was like, that was what you all remember when you had that, like, you fell in love with Vector moment. Does everyone kind of, you'll remember, you're like, this is great. Like, I'm going to be here for a while. And that wasn't, you didn't define exact, but I was in one of those places And I wrote out my life goals. And I wrote down, become a division manager in 5 years or something like that. Okay. And what's fascinating is in between the 5 years, I quit Vector. But what's fascinating is 4 years and 52 weeks later, I became a division manager. So I'm giving you an extreme example of I straight up quit Vector, even though I was like, I planted the seed. I was like, maybe just like I was in my garden, right? I planted some seeds. I don't know how it's going to turn out. And then you water it and you do whatever. And I was like, all right, forget this garden. It's not going to. And then 4 years and 52 weeks later, I got promoted. So to answer your question is all of you have a different path. And again, my path might not be your path. In other words, how I thought about it might be very different. What I can promise you, look, I remember playing sports growing up. Every single sport I ever played, everything I've ever done, whether it's marriage, and I'll be really candid with you, there were times I was like, I can't do this. Right? Marriage is hard, right? Anything you're ever going to do, and I put this in the chat earlier, anything that's worth it in your life, you're going to want to quit. Again, I threw in the chat, like I've never said to myself, like, I'm going to quit as I'm eating ice cream, watching TV. I'm not like, I'm going to quit this. It's because it's inconsequential and it doesn't matter. But anything that's of consequence that challenges you and pushes you out of your comfort zone, you're going to want to quit it. And my advice to people is always, don't quit at a low point, quit at a high point. Quit when you know that you're making a decision from a place of like power and value. Does that answer you? I don't know, doesn't perfectly answer your question, Nick, but does that help?
Yeah, it helps a lot. Like your whole gardening analogy was great. The whole garden box just brings the Vector experience together. To me personally, is everything. So that was one of my big questions for you.
Yeah, and look, I'll tell you, the whole garden thing, like if I didn't do Vector, and I'm not joking, I probably would have not endeavored to do something new. But I started selling knives. I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know anything about knives. And then I became like fascinated about trying new things that were out of my comfort zone. So like over the course of my time at Vector, like I've picked up sailing, I've picked up, martial arts, I've picked up, golf. So there's so many different things I picked up because I was like, there's a whole world out there, sales, and when I first started, that I never knew anything about. And I was like, I got into what's called a growth mindset. It's a book by Carol Dweck, and they're just like, you can learn anything. I was like, if I could learn how to sell knives and I could learn how to sell, if I could be an expert on knives and learn sales, I can learn how to do anything. Now, maybe that's not true, but I just think I have a good work ethic. And over time, you could probably teach me neuroscience and I'd probably learn it. I might learn it slower than others, but I'm pretty sure I can learn it. And that's what I want you to get out of this summer is the self-confidence that you can accomplish anything that you want to. Other questions?
So a quick follow-up. So when you quit Vector, how'd you know you were coming back?
Because I said, I'm going to go to law school. I took the LSATs. I got a good score. I applied to law schools. I got in. And I was like, well, it's not until the fall. So I might as well do Vector just to make some cash. And then I loved it. I really kind of played with no fear. And I was like, I love this. I'm going to defer law school for 1 year. And I'm going to go for it at Vector. And if it doesn't work out, I'll go to law school. That was my plan B. Right. And I really went for it then. And then I loved the job. And my brother told me, he's an attorney. He said, I have friends that are attorneys right now, mostly to pay law school. It's not even because they like the job. And he goes, so if you like your job, stick with it. And it's really fascinating. I get together every other Thursday with my college friends, and we have a virtual happy hour. And I'm the one that really truly loves this job. It's really fast because I chose a job early that I knew I would love. So I'm not saying everyone loves Vector or everyone's going to love the job at Vector, but I like working with people. I like helping people. It works for me. And if you pay me to do it, I'll be happy to do it. All right, some other questions.
Yeah, Mike, we've got a few with raised hands. M.
Sure.
Miller.
Yeah. So my question is, what do you do when you or like your rep is having trouble finding their why?
Great question. Let's crowdsource this again. All right. And I have a point of view, but oftentimes I like to throw questions right back at them. When they're like, I don't know why. I just go, yeah, just what would be one? And oftentimes you just push them a little bit and they're like, well, I guess it would be, I had a rep once who he'd made a ton of money. So I'm hoping that you'll crowdsource. He made a ton of money selling Cutco. He sold 60,000 the summer before, and he was making half. So he made $30,000 as a 19-year-old. And he's like, I don't really feel like pushing. I don't want to make any money. And I was like, all right, well, if you don't want to make money, I go, why don't you donate it? I'm like, you're making half. With great power comes great responsibility. And he goes, all right. So he sold $10,000. And as a 20-year-old, he donated $5,000 to charity. So I think sometimes it's just kind of asking, a little bit more about that. What are some thoughts about helping people find their whys?
I think thought joggers are a really good thing when you're sitting down in a PCs. Like if I was sitting down with Liam or whatnot and he didn't know his why, I'd be like, well, you're in school, so don't you want to pay off your debts, or any kind of thought jogger to get them really thinking about why they're in that moment.
Yeah. Again, so it could be something like, hey, what kind of so if I were you, you should all do this. What are all of the possible whys that someone might get? Right. So, hey, do you want to be a leader and be the example for others? Right. Do you like to make cash? Do you want to donate your cash? Do you want some recognition, maybe a scholarship, or, do you want to impress mom and dad? Is there someone that you want to impress? Right. Do you want to just have another notch on your belt of like, I'm a butt kicker and Cutco's another one? Like, do you want to be able to tell a story in a job interview? Hey, what's your dream job? And how could this help that? So I'm just giving you some thought joggers around some reasons why people can and will push. Does that help? Em?
Yes, thank you.
All right, my pleasure. We have time for maybe one or two more. Kyle, is there anyone that had a hand up? Or
Xavier and then Katie, if we have time.
Okay, I'll try to make this one quick, but I wanted to ask, what is a good way to measure how I can view my value as an individual?
I think that's a great question for you to answer. So what's a great way? I think, this is one of those, remember we talked about journaling? Just ask yourself that question. Our brain is, again, this is not Mike Muriel speaking. I heard this neuroscientist speak about this, but our brain is unbelievable. And you've all kind of heard, like, our brain is so much more powerful than what we use it for in terms of capacity. The other thing I've heard is that your brain will always move to completion when you ask a question. So when you say, like, what's the name of that actor that was in that movie with George Clooney where they were like, there was like a nuclear, oh yeah, Nicole Kidman, right? And like, that's what'll happen. What's that called again? Oh yeah, it was called The Peacemaker, right? So you'll do that, except it won't come to you that quickly. You're taking a shower and you're like, The Peacemaker, right? And you're celebrating in the shower and no one's, like watching you, right? So, but ask yourself that question. Hey, how can I add value? Again, I would encourage you to look at what are my strengths? Okay, because your strengths are always a great way for you to add the most value. And then what's my purpose? It's kind of the question I asked a little bit earlier. That would be my advice, but it's a great question for you to explore. Look, what I got to tell you, again, I'm in my 50s. There's a lot of people that I know in their 50s that are kind of questioning, wait, what did I do at the last part of my career? And I have several friends that are like switching careers completely, mostly because they followed one thing that they thought they were going to get value from. And there's no judgment there. I mean, you're going to change your mind at different points in your life. All right. I think we have one more question.
Yeah, Katie, go for it.
Mike, I think you kind of covered this, but I just want to kind of ask again, you know, we're all human, right? We all have bad days. How do you pull yourself out of those funks? You personally?
Yeah, great. I every year before the year starts, somewhere in like between August and November, I take time and it's kind of like the what's it called? The Abraham Lincoln quote. And I'm going to get this not perfectly, but he said something, if he was going to chop a tree, he would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe and 2 hours chopping. So to me, it's kind of the same thing. Like before I'm going to do anything, I want to be really clear on like, why am I doing this? So somewhere between August and November, and if you're like, but it's already May, I can't do this. Yeah, you can. You can do this anytime. It's like time is actually, and I don't want to get philosophical here, but time is a construct of like, human beings. Like there's no such thing as May, right? We just made that up, right? There's no such thing as 3:59 on Thursday. We made that up, right? So here's my point is that every year I sit down and I just say, hey, what are the most important things? Who do I want to be in life? Right? To myself, to my wife, to my kids, as a member of the community, to Vector, and it's really in that order, family, friends, right? And then who do I want to be and where am I right now? And then I go, okay, well, how do I get from here to there? So for instance, one of the things I've tried to work on really for the last 19 years is, my reactivity at times. So sometimes I get reactive. That's pretty human, right? Boom, that. Another thing is like, hey, last year I didn't read as much and I just felt like I wasn't learning as much. And so I have like a book list. I have like 30 plus books that if I start reading one and I don't like it, I just put it down and I grab another book. And so I put a lot of habits into my schedule that force the growth that I want to have. Does that help?
Yeah,
words,
thank you, Mike.
Taking time to plan my life has been really effective. Some people plan their vacations like to the T. I plan my life to the T. My vacations are always going to be, I don't care where I go, I'm going to have fun. I spend more time planning my life.